So I'd like to bring in former NASA astronaut, Colonel Terry Virts. Colonel Virts, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. So another explosion yesterday. What was your reaction? What do you think it means for the bigger picture here?
Well, I think the big picture is that SpaceX is trying to do something hard. This rocket is huge. It's amazing what they've accomplished with the Falcon 9, but this is definitely the next step. And it's something that SpaceX needs for its Starlink plans and also NASA needs for its moon plans. So it's an important rocket. But of course, this was the 8th test and they've had some problems. The bigger issue for me, and really something that I'm kind of shocked about, is that they're launching these things over land. And they just had an accident a few weeks ago. We all remember the Starship 7 launch created all that debris that landed on some Caribbean islands. And so to launch over land is generally a bad idea. That's why normally we launch out of Florida and or out of California, where you just launch over the ocean and there's no land out there. So that's a big issue. And we could talk about Elon's role in the government and potential influence there too. I think that's really the issue that we need to talk about.
Yeah, well, let's absolutely talk about that. Before we get to that, though, I mean, you mentioned the fact of, doing these tests over land. There were reports of debris yesterday falling down. As you mentioned, the second straight, explosion of one of Musk's craft. I mean, is something wrong, or do you think that's kind of to be expected?
Well, it's a test, and so it's to be expected. But and so if I were in charge, and I'm definitely not, I would probably do the tests from Florida where they're out over the Atlantic. And if it explodes, you don't really want to launch over land ever if you can avoid it. But if you need to, you probably want to make sure the rocket is going to work. And I'd like to talk about Elon's role in this, but also if an explosion happened in space, and of course it would be a much different situation. It wouldn't be a booster engine, but they're doing rendezvous with these massive starships in space in order to refuel the moon lander for NASA's moon program.
Right.
And if there was an explosion during that would create debris that would stay in orbit. It would be a really bad mess. And so you really want to make sure these things work before you put them in dangerous situations.
Very good point there. All right, let's talk about Elon Musk's role in all of this. Talk about potential conflicts of interest here.
Well, potential, is not really the word. I mean, Elon is clearly an important government contractor. I've seen he's gotten over $30 billion in recent years from the government. And he's also been put in charge of the government. And he also has the ear of the president on demand. He's in the Oval Office in his T-shirt and hat, not in a suit and tie. So that kind of influence directly in the government. And he has influence over every government agency. And I mean, he's actually destroyed entire government agencies since he and Trump took over a few weeks ago. So, I mean, this gives conflicts of interest a bad name. This is like the definition of corruption. And of course, you shouldn't have a major contractor also in charge of the government that's giving out these contracts. For example, there was some, discussion about, is Starlink going to get a big FAA contract? It's actually the FAA that approves these launches, and the Department of Transportation, Secretary Sean Duffy, has been praising Elon, and Elon's here and he's helping us out. So it's kind of the definition of conflict of interest that doesn't really, I hope, sit well with the American people.
There's also this talk of bringing home those astronauts, the 2 astronauts who are stranded right now on the International Space Station. There has been some, back and forth in this. Politics have kind of entered into it. But what do you think it will take to finally bring them home? I mean, they've said they don't feel stranded, but what do you think it'll take?
Yeah, well, it's going to take just normal. Like they went from Boeing test mission. NASA said, well, Boeing, the capsule probably will work. And it actually did work, but we just want to be safe. So we're not going to bring you home on that capsule. And they just transitioned to a normal space station mission. So they're, when I was up there for 200 days, they're on a normal rotation. And that they're going to come back normally as part of a normal SpaceX capsule that was contracted. I'm using the word normal a lot, but they went from test mission to normal rotation. And I really hope we can get politics out of NASA, because you can have politics for, immigration and tax policy, whatever else, but let's keep politics out of NASA, because everybody loves space, Republicans and Democrats and independents. And I really hope we can get away from this politicization of everything, and let's just enjoy space. It can be our happy place.
Right, absolutely. Well, former NASA astronaut Colonel Terry Virts, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.